might not. So as I'm around, that way if something goes down. No, you're covered.
Are you ready? Yeah, no, because I asked Jacqueline, she's like, do you want to? Thank you.
All right, I'm going to start the live stream. Okay.
Renata, go back. Hi everybody, Renata and I would like to introduce Hailey. I'm gonna pass it over to Renata here. We're so happy to have this additional research presentation, the capstone project by Hailey. Renata, please, if you could provide some more context.
Thank you, Jacqueline. So Hailey and I work together at the Eliot-Pearson Children's School, attached to the Child Studies and Human Development Department, and a lot of other courses. And it's amazing to see how Hailey's been integrating both what she's been doing here as a dance minor and as her major in Child Studies and Human Development. So I'm not going to take her time more, but thank you all for being here. And if we have to exit quickly, you can go out this door and either way out, right? And we are live streaming. Hello, people who are live streaming. And I think you can film, right? If you want, I don't know.
Yeah.
This is informal, so if you want pictures of filming, just go, knock yourself out.
Yes.
There's no flashes for the artist because she might get dizzy. Okay, so Hailey, welcome and thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone for coming and welcome to my dance capstone presentation. I'm presenting on dance development and disability, how dance education supports accessibility and inclusivity. So this has been a project of mine throughout the entire year, and I'm ready to present what I found. So for just some background on the project, like Renata said, I'm a child study and human development major here at Tufts, and I also have minors obviously in dance and history, and then after I graduate from Tufts, I have plans to go to a graduate studies program in elementary education and then become an elementary school teacher. So this project was really an opportunity for me to kind of integrate different interests that I have both at Tufts and for my future. So for the structure of my project, I, like Renata said, assisted Renata in the creative dance classes at the Eliot-Pearson Children's School, and I also taught and led certain classes and certain sections of lessons. And then outside of that, I did research on the connections between dance and disability and development and accessibility. So how dance can provide an accessible education to lots of different types of students. And many of you probably already know this because you're here at my presentation, but the arts are really important for education because they offer ways of learning that extend beyond a typical classroom of reading, writing, and math and science. And so they really open opportunities for discovery and challenge and creativity. So Elliot Eisner, who was a professor of education at Stanford University, wrote a lot about the lessons that the arts teach, and one of the lessons that he highlights is that the arts make vivid the fact that neither words in their literal form nor numbers exhaust what we know. So in the context of education, some students who may be very strong at reading, writing, and math, the arts offer an opportunity for them to challenge themselves in different ways, express themselves in different ways, and for students who might have difficulty with the traditional classroom topics, the arts offer another way to showcase their abilities and their strengths. And different organizations and different educational entities in the United States have focused a lot on the arts. So for example, in 1994, the National Art Standards were created, and they highlight the categories of creating, performing, presenting, and producing, responding, and connecting. And I think that this really highlights how the arts are about more than just the final product that happens. They're about the process of creating it, they're about responding to other people's art, and they're also about connecting art to other parts of the world and other parts of education. And dance education specifically is very unique because it accesses all different domains of learning. So physical, cognitive, emotional, and social. Of course, there are the physical skills of dancing, learning how to move your body through space, learning how your body works. There are also cognitive skills such as learning how to problem solve, learning how to take ideas and bring them to action. And then the emotional and social. For many students, perhaps words cannot express emotions in the same way for them, so dance offers another way to express those types of emotions, to have a different form of regulating their emotions. And the social, of course, dance classes generally happen in a big group, so there's always types of learning how to navigate working with a partner, working with groups, and those social skills. So different educational school districts have come up with ways in which they want to foster dance. So, for example, New York City created the Blueprint for Teaching and Learning in Dance, and this focuses on K through 12 education and what different types of standards they want their students to be able to learn, not just the physical skills, but also the skills of connecting the arts to other domains of learning and other forms of development. And this was created in 2004, but it continues to be revised. And this type of connection between the different domains of learning and different aspects of being a human that dance can provide has been known to different artists and dance educators for a long time. So, for example, Bonnie Bainbridge Cohen, who was a dancer and the founder of Body Mind Centering, says that we find that movement can be a way to observe the expression of mind through the body, and it can also be a way to affect changes in the body-mind relationship. So education through dance really provides education for the whole person, not just one aspect. It's not only about the physical, it's about educating all of the aspects of being a person. So through this research on the background of arts education, I came up with questions looking at accessibility in terms of the arts. How can the arts foster ways of learning that are accessible to all different types of students? So how can dance foster inclusivity and accessibility, playing to the strengths of students while supporting their development? How are adaptation, flexibility, and sensitivity to varying learning styles and needs integrated into the creative dance classroom? And what lessons can creative dance teach us that can be applied to all areas of our education system, allowing for more accessible education? And I will say that in terms of the scope of my project, I definitely focused more on the first two questions because they were very observable in the Eliot-Pearson setting. And this last question was a little bit more personal for me about how I want to take the lessons that I learned in these classes into my role as a teacher after I graduate from Tufts. So just a note on disability and accessibility in schools in general. In the 2022 to 2023 school year, about 15% of public school students, so about 7.5 million students in the United States, receive special education or related services. So this includes all different types of disabilities and differences. The largest percentage was for learning disabilities, but all different types of differences, including hearing impairments, visual impairments, physical differences, things like that. So this is a large, relatively large number of students, and we want to make sure that education for them is very accessible. And the social model of disability is something that I learned about in Leandra Ellion's class in the Child Studies department, and this is advocated for by many people nowadays, and it views disability and difference as neutral characteristics. So instead of seeing disability and difference as kind of a deficit or something that needs to be cured or fixed, they're just characteristics that, like any other characteristic that we have, and so it shifts the problem away from individuals' impairments and services by focusing on social barriers which prevent those with disabilities from full participation in society. So in the context of dance, how can we create an environment where students are able to access it, both a physical environment and also a social environment? And specifically at Eliot-Pearson School, there are some factors that are important to note. First of all, specialists, so people who teach dance and music and those types of things, don't have access to full student profiles or diagnoses. And this is common in educational settings, especially for preschools and such. So it is a challenge in that maybe the first class that you go in, you really don't know what to expect. But skilled teachers like Renata are able to see what is meeting them in the classroom and adapting the changes as they go. So some sorts of observable differences in Eliot-Pearson this year were hearing impairments, developmental delays, and definitely behavior and emotion regulation challenges for some students. And also to note, at Eliot-Pearson, we're very lucky that staffing support issues don't exist because the main classroom teachers stay in the classroom during the classes, and they do know a lot about the different student profiles, the specifics of what they need because they're with them all day. So accessibility in the context of dance education, specifically what I observed at Eliot-Pearson, it reflects how dance classes and dance teachers, creative dance teachers, can adapt and provide the flexibility, offering many different access points for students regardless of their abilities or differences. So the structures of the classes, I assisted at the classes throughout the entire year, and they are Friday mornings, 30 minutes per class, so 4 classes back to back. And the oldest students at Eliot-Pearson are about 6 years old, and then the youngest class, they're about 3 years old, so they're quite little, very cute. And the class always follows the same structure, which is the next section of my presentation. I'll go through the structure of the classes. Actually, before the students even arrive, there are factors that are really important. So Renata and I would move the chairs, move the couches, clearing the space, and sweeping, making sure that it's an environment that's conducive to dance and movement, and then closing the window shades so that there's not the distraction of looking out onto the playground at peers who are playing. And then, importantly, we put out the colored spots, as you can see over here, and this provides a visual for students when they enter, what's expected of them. It provides structure to the space. And then also we'll put out these posters, and the posters reflect different themes or different things that are being explored in the dance class, and these were all created by Renata. She has about 20 of them, and so they provide visuals as well as words, providing different ways of engaging with the material, especially if students maybe don't learn as well through listening, they have a visual to look at. And then when students arrive, there's a very specific pattern to it. They know exactly what to expect in the structure. They come right in, they take off their shoes, they know to line them up. Sometimes that takes a little bit, but line up the shoes. And then they know to find a spot, and we often don't put like 2 colors that are next to each other, so two of the same colors next to each other, so that provides a visual of each spot. And then Renata or I will take attendance, which allows for connection with each student. The classes are fairly large. There are about 15 to 20 students per class, so having that time to connect with each student and see where they're at that day is really important. So like I said, this routine that they know, it really creates structure and a safe space for students because they know what to expect when they enter the classroom, they know what's expected of them. And especially for students who have difficulties with transitions or changes, that structure can be really helpful to them in coming into the dance classroom. And then the first dance movement that we do is the brain dance, which was created by Anne Green Gilbert. She's a dance educator, very influential. And this brain dance is designed to warm up the body as well as the brain, and it's based on fundamental movement patterns that babies discover in their first year. So it follows the development of the body and brain as we warm up. So it starts, that's also this poster here. It starts with the breath, and the breath connects us to our physical body as well as our emotional state. And then the tactile, so that has to do with touch, and is really important for sensory development. And core distal, so then that's movement from in the core and reaching out, so that connects students both to the outside world and to themselves. Then there's the head-tail movement, so looking at the spine, spinal movement, and that's very important for developing postural muscles, for developing strength in the core. And then upper-lower, so moving one half of the body, keeping the other body stable, moving the other half of the body and keeping, vice versa. And then body sides, so exercising different sides of the brain, which is very important for development, not just physical development, but also in terms of intellectual development. Cross-lateral, so moving across the midline of the body, which is important for connecting to higher thinking models, so connecting different sides of the brain is very important for that. And also eye tracking across the midline is important for learning for reading, writing, math, those types of things. And then vestibular, which has to do with your sense of balance, and that's very important for learning, for coordination, for balance, for those types of physical skills, and also for proprioception, which is your ability to sense your body in space. Okay, so now that we've been sitting for a bit, it's your turn to do, we're gonna do an abbreviated brain dance. So you can come find a spot, like the kids. If there's not enough spots, you can imagine some extra spots. David, you're a wonderful leader. Thank you.
Oh my god, this is awesome. Right, isn't this the best?
All right, so excellent work. What you have just experienced was the brain dance and then an exploration, which is the next part of the class. And this explores a theme, a movement theme or concept that are generally based on Laban movement analysis, which was created by Rudolf von Laban in the 1910s. And so these types of themes explore the body, so what's moving, the effort and dynamics, how it's moving, the space, where you're moving, and relationships with whom. So some examples, like you just experienced, was pathways. There's an example of tempo. We can do levels, so high level, low level. An example of a relationship would be like in front, next to, and behind, those types of themes. So for example, I did a lesson on tempo with the two younger classes, and I brought out the drum, which we don't have here, but it's okay, I forgot. But I brought out the drum, and I gave them a tempo. They started by clapping their hands, and then I changed the tempo of the drum, and I asked them, was that faster or slower than the last one? And then they explored with other parts of their body. So they explored with their feet on the ground, and maybe they explored moving their head to the tempo, and their hips, and they got to call out which parts of the body they wanted to explore with the tempo. And then after they did that on their spots, they moved throughout the space, moving their body to the tempo. And so one important part of the explorations that Anne Green Gilbert talks about a lot is the balance between teacher direction and student voice. So teachers are there to facilitate new ways of moving, but the student voice, the agency of the students to make decisions about how they move or in what way they want to move is very important. And then a couple different examples of different access points and how different modes of learning through dance are exhibited. One of them was the lesson that Renata did on pathways, just like this. We taped out the pathways on the ground with the X marking where you start from. And there were a couple students in one of the classes who often were engaged, but they wouldn't necessarily move as big movements or as expressive. And then suddenly, when they were given a pathway to follow, they were moving in very expressive, very big ways and leading their peers through the movement. Another example with the parachute that you see behind here, on the last day of class, we did parachute day outside, and there's one student in one of the younger classes who had some developmental delays, often was very engaged, watching everything, but not moving his body so much. But then suddenly, when he was given the tactile sensations of the parachute, he was jumping, he was pulling on the parachute, running under it, counting the stars on the top of it. So those are some ways that you can foster different ways of learning through the dance classes. And another example would be the scarves. So we pass out some scarves just to get a feeling of some of the tactile sensations. And as well as the emotional learning. So don't hurt each other. maybe this is a good transition to social emotional learning and not hurting each other. So a lot of times in the classes, especially with the themes on relationships, we're thinking about how can students work together. For example, with circle dances, learning how to cooperate in a big group, moving in ways that are safe for themselves and for those around them. So overall, these types of explorations that are fostered by the creative movement, they allow for freedom, for choice in movement, and many different points of entry. So there's not one way that you have to dance or one correct answer. And so that allows for a lot of accessibility and inclusivity of different abilities and different developmental stages. And then after the exploration, there's the culmination, so a way for students to show what they learned in that day. So the structure might depend on the day. So for example, it might be an activity sequence, such as when we did stiff spaghetti to loose spaghetti, and the students went through that activity sequence and exhibited different movement qualities. Then the culmination for that day was going through that same sequence again, but moving through it more quickly. They were exhibiting what they had learned throughout the day. Or perhaps, oftentimes it's a freeze dance, so exploring the movement concept in any way that they want now, and then freezing when the music stops. And often for these culminations, there are some sort of prompts to see if they can add, especially with the older levels, another element to it. So for example, with the lesson on tempo that I did, I added an element of tempo maybe with levels. So can you move at a fast tempo at a high level? Now can you move at a fast tempo at a low level? Those types of things. But overall, the students exhibit their understanding of the concepts in ways that fit what they're able to do, what they want to do, and they're also their developmental stages. And then, like the beginning, the end, there's a very specific structure to it. Coming back into a circle, this time without the dots, so it requires a little bit more cooperation. And then putting the students directed to put on their shoes, line up, and then give high fives or sometimes a little wave or something to me or Renata. And again, this type of structure, ritual at the end helps them transition from having lots of energy, big movements throughout the dance class, and back into the mode for the rest of the day. So I was also interested to look at some applications beyond Eliot-Pearson. I found a Canadian study that was done on students ages 6 through 10, and they were looking at the experiences of disabled students in dance education classrooms, and they were integrated with all different types of abilities and differences. So there were kids on the autism spectrum, there were kids who had visual or hearing impairments, and they found that the dance education environment offered students with disabilities opportunities to explore and discover their movement possibilities, so the physical skills, but also again, and to socially interact with non-disabled peers. So it was offering peer acceptance and ways for inclusive education and also the bodily learning. And then another example is dance therapy for children. I spoke with a dance therapist named Corinne Ott, and I want to emphasize that dance therapy is different in that it is a therapeutic mode. It has therapeutic goals, different goals from creative dance for children. However, it is another way that dance fosters a way for the whole person to be accounted for, as Corinne said. So the way that dance integrates all different aspects of a person is also available through dance movement therapy. And Corinne actually worked as a dance movement therapist in an educational setting for 20 years. So that was another example, and again, she talked a lot about how she scaffolded the learning and the therapeutic process based on the strengths of the students when they come in, and building upon that, breaking down different skills so that they can expand their abilities. And so just to conclude, of course the Eliot-Pearson classes were kind of my case study, and they're just one example of how dance can be integrated into an educational setting. I think it's a great example of it here with the preschoolers. And unfortunately, while dance education is fairly common with preschoolers and younger students, it tends to kind of peter off as students get older in favor of like more serious topics. But I would advocate that that dance is important and it is essential and serious, and it should be taken seriously throughout all of the education system, because it really accesses all different forms of learning and the integration of the whole person. And then just personally thinking about how we can take some of the lessons from the dance classes into the rest of the education system. Personally, I want to have a lot of physical learning and movement opportunities in other classes, not just as a way for learning concepts, but also as a way to help with emotion regulation, for bringing classrooms together, for social interaction too. And so overall, I found that dance opens the door for creative thinking and learning through multiple modes of communication and expression. It really integrates all different forms of learning and communication. And it offers an adaptable mode, like I said, for the integration of the whole person. So the ways in which dance can be taught can vary based on the student population and who comes into the room. And so in that way, it allows for accessibility and inclusivity for all different types of students and learners and movers. All right, thank you.
I just want to invite everybody. So Hailey's been a part of the senior dance cohort, so the collective of seniors doing projects. I think it's been so wonderful to have you really dig into a research project, and I hope that you can see some of this brain dance in some of your training that you've done in classwork here. We hide it and slip it in there, right, as educators all the time. So I wanted to open the floor for any questions that we might have. She's ready. She's been working on this for a while. She's ready. So
I also, before the questions, I also just wanted to say a huge thank you to Renata, because this whole project would not have been possible without you teaching creative dance for children, for college students, and then also teaching the classes at Eliot-Pearson. And you've been such an amazing mentor, and you're actually the reason that I'm a dance minor. So. A lot of students.
I was on a studio that did the break dance at high school, and I wasn't sure what you would suggest the age range for the break dance is, or if it's like a lifelong. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it can definitely be a lifelong exploration and way of warming up. What I did here was kind of a version of what we do with the preschoolers, but for example, in Renata's class for creative dance for children that I took, we each did versions of the brain dance that were more geared towards our age range. And so, yeah, you can make the movements more complex. You can extend different parts of it to access different parts of development that maybe need more work and those types of things. So it's very adaptable to all different ages.
Curious about any other verbal facilitation with the children. You talked about the binding the scheme. Is there anything else sort of to get them to talk to one another or talk to you, or like verbal components of the physical?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I mean, there's definitely a lot of audio cues too, so we often use the drum as a way of getting attention. Often the problem in class isn't so much that they're not talking, it's that they're talking too much to each other. So it's also about having them have the skills to know when to engage, when to express with their bodies.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, but if you've talked to any of the teachers at Eliot-Pearson, do they have anything to say about what they've observed in their students, through the span of a couple of years, in terms of the students' ability to self-regulate in, I think, a time when children are increasingly dysregulated and disembodied? Have they noticed either a difference between before and after your class, or also just the other years?
Yeah, I haven't talked too much with them about it, but one thing that I would say that definitely applies to this is when I did the class on tempo and it had those different like stop and slow tempo, fast. One of the teachers was taking pictures of those posters so that she could use the same language with them in the classroom. So it's the ways that we can introduce different concepts in the dance classroom that can then be applied in the rest of their education. And in terms of just seeing changes throughout the year in the dance class, like for these kids, especially the 3-year-olds, like one school year is a really big portion of their life. And so the difference, especially for the youngest group from the first class to the last class, is like extreme in so many ways. Like there were students at the beginning of the semester who would just come in crying, or at the beginning of the year would just come in crying, wouldn't participate at all, and are now at the end of the semester like one of the most engaged students in the class. Yes, Rona?
Was there anything like surprising or unexpected that you found from like working at UP or from your background research?
I think one of the things that wasn't necessarily surprising but was one of the most challenging for me when I was facilitating the learning was just classroom management of it. I feel like with all my research and all my classes that I've taken at Tufts, I have a really good concept of like what to teach and how I would like students to engage with it, but then it's always the dance of when you come to the class, what's actually presented in class. So I think that was maybe the most challenging. That's not exactly the most, but that's what I think it's for.
How are you going to integrate this into your work as an teacher?
Well, one thing that I was just talking to Corinne about yesterday, the dance therapist, was integrating movement even just at the beginning of the day. So even if we do like a mini little brain dance at the beginning of the day, and we don't have to call it the brain dance, but just like waking up, and that like being very grounding for the students and allowing them to kind of transition into the rest of the day. And I also think like with different challenging behaviors or maybe different dynamics in the classroom, I think movement can be a really good way to like recenter the class, especially if things are getting out of hand. Yes,
At the school, like this is fascinating to me. At the school, do you ever have communication with parents and kind of articulate what you just showed us and told us about how dance is used at the school with the children?
I don't know if Renata does.
I know that they are very avid about taking the pictures, doing the little blurs, and letting the parents know that this happens. We're kind of invisible.
Yeah. We did go though they had a dance day, a family day with the students and their parents, and so we went to that and did like kind of a dance so that they can get a little sense of it. And I think some parents there were very engaged and like came right up to Renata and said, "Thank you for doing this." And so I think they're getting the information, but depends on the parent, I guess. Yes, Jenny.
Way further down the line, everything that you shared is so potent with like fact and the ways that embodiment supports all of us in our development, not only as children, but throughout our lives. I'm wondering would there ever be like a book you would write, or like an article you would publish, or some way that you would share this even more broadly or more widely accessible to folks?
I definitely say it's a possibility in my life. I really enjoy having opportunities and like engaging with students. Obviously, that's why I'm going to be a teacher. But I definitely, especially enjoy writing and communication through writing. So I could definitely see that as being.
And Haley's paper is due very soon.
I will be continuing to write about this. Oh, and here am I.
Thank you, Haley, and thank you everybody for coming today. I assume if this is out, we might be able to play with it. If you would like to, before you leave, have that experience.
I'll take your scarf. Unless you really love it, and just take it as a souvenir. Sometimes they do disappear. Great. Thank you.
I love parachute dance.
Camille, can you move that more?
What you asked was kind of what I was getting at, which is like parents of like came on to presentations, or if there was another mode of like, you know, communicating all the information.
You might. And then the parents can understand that it's not just
Yeah. Especially if so many parents. There certainly is a group of